The wind blew gently through the streets of the city, a fresh wind that brought with it the smell of early winter. It was a discreet breeze, almost muffled, but enough to awaken the first chills of the season. The pavement creaked under the feet of Clara, a black woman in her 30s, who walked with a quick but uncertain step. His legs felt heavy, as if the weight of each step was a test, but it was impossible for him to slow down. Her 3-year-old son was snuggled in her arms, his fragile little body lost in the warmth of his mother's chest. The child, tired from the whole journey, was sleeping soundly, his head resting against Clara's shoulder. His light, regular breathing reassured her in a way, like a promise that, at least for him, a mother's love was enough to ease the pain of the world. Clara held her body close to her as a last barrier against the outside world, which seemed to devour her at every corner. The city, with its pale lights and blurred silhouettes, became an unforgiving labyrinth. Every street, every look, every step further seemed to push her towards an end she couldn't even imagine. Clara no longer had a home. A few days ago, she was forced to leave her apartment after months of rent arrears. The letters threatening to deport her had become ordinary papers, buried in the pile of other bills she couldn't pay. The owner, a strict and merciless woman, did not want to hear his excuses or understand his situation. Too many debts and not enough promises, she told him coldly before giving him an eviction notice, like an irrevocable sentence. Clara had lost everything. His dignity, his home, his dream of building a future for his son. The memories of the apartment, although small and modest, were now tinged with pain. She remembered the warmth of the kitchen, the sound of her son's laughter playing in the living room, the dim morning light filtering through the curtains. All this now belonged to a bygone past, erased by the violence of the administration, by the steamroller of poverty which had engulfed it without pity. She had no family who could take her in. His mother, who died a few years ago, had been his last refuge. His disappearance had taken with it a part of his soul, and the pain of this loss was renewed every day. His father, for his part, was a distant figure in his mind, a ghost, a stranger who had never taken up space in his life. She had no close friends, just casual acquaintances, but no one wanted to commit to long-term help. The social network that surrounded him seemed so fragile, so foreign. Every sideways glance in the street, every whisper behind her back, every politely deflected smile reminded her how alone she was. Isolation was a kind of invisible accomplice that infiltrated his daily life, feeding his feeling of inadequacy. She didn't belong here, in this city, or in this life. Everything seemed to be working against her, starting with her identity. A black woman, single mother, without stable employment, who carried the stigma of a society that rejected her even before knowing her. She had tried shelters, but every door seemed to close before she even had time to knock. No room. We already have too many people.
Cometemaro.
The excuses were numerous. Too many. Each no was another blow to his pride, each closing of a door, another defeat. She was fed up. Fed up with this life where the invisible defined her. A single mother without status, a stranger in her own city, a black body desperately trying to blend into a world that had no place for her. She was neither the victim nor the heroine of her story, just a woman who, day after day, survived, without knowing where the road would take her. She was fighting, certainly, but against an enemy too great for her. The streets passed by, the skyscrapers rising like giants in the darkness, imposing and cold, like monuments to the success of those who had the right to comfort. Clara had no destination, no plan, no place to stay, just the certainty that she couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not with her son asleep in her arms. We had to move forward. Keep walking, until her feet burn out, until there is no more strength in her. But hope, thin, wavering, encouraged him to take one more step. Maybe at the end of this street, at the next intersection, there would be a sign, an outstretched hand, a light. Maybe. Or not. But she had no choice but to continue. She passed a cafe where an old sign blinked in an irregular motion that seemed to whisper to her promises of warmth and comfort. Through the glass, she saw people sitting at a table, quietly enjoying coffee, the golden light dancing around them, a scene of normality, of everyday life, far from her reality. Heat escaped from inside, like a perfume brushing against her, but it was too late to stop. Too risky. She couldn't allow herself to be seen, to enter, to pretend to belong to this world. A quick glance at the window showed him a mother and her child, comfortably seated at a table, a moment of calm and tenderness that Clara, alas, could no longer allow herself to enjoy. She looked away. There was no point looking at what she could never reach. This coffee was a mirage, a promise she would never have the chance to keep. As she continued on her way, a little inner voice told her to stop, to seek help. But Clara had learned to be wary of outstretched hands.
Too many disappointments, too many broken promises.
Each time, she had believed in a savior, and each time, the truth was harsh. The only person she could count on was herself. Although the world was big, she knew deep down that the entire weight of her situation rested on her shoulders. No escape. No savior. She had to survive, for him, for her son. Suddenly, a man stopped in front of her. He wore a dark coat and sunglasses, even in the dark, and he looked a little strange, a little off, almost too perfect for this moment. Clara was about to avoid him, as she had learned to avoid the glances of strangers in the street, but he spoke to her in a calm but authoritative voice.
Ma'am, you need help.
Clara felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her as she took this first step towards this unknown man. She instinctively hugged her son tighter to her, as if his presence was the only thing still keeping her grounded in reality. Every fiber of his being was screaming at him to flee, to maintain his independence, to defend himself. But deep inside her, a small voice, tenuous and fragile, whispered to her that maybe, just maybe, this man was not trying to manipulate her, but to help her. They walked silently, the sounds of the city gradually fading away behind them.
The air grew colder, the night deepening, like a cloak of darkness settling over the city.
Clara was on guard, every movement of the man capturing her attention. He seemed calm, but his silence was not reassuring. She wondered where he was taking her. "How do you know there's a place for us?" she finally asked, her voice tight, betraying her worry. The man did not respond immediately, but his steps became slower, more measured. He seemed to hesitate, as if he were weighing his words. "I've seen people in situations like yours, people who didn't have anything to eat or a place to go. I've had my share of struggles too, Clara," he said, turning slightly towards her. "Sometimes we think there is no more room for us. But there is always a place somewhere. A place that is not a cold shelter, a place where we can finally breathe." Clara didn't answer right away, her thoughts swirling. How could he know? How did this stranger know her name, and why did he call her that? She was lost in the whirlwind of her own doubts and fears. Yet part of her felt drawn to his words, a distant echo of hope, a spark in a world of darkness.
And you, have you found one?
"A place for you?" she asked, her voice lower now, as if trying to test this man's sincerity. A sad smile appeared on his face, a smile that was neither happy nor cruel, but full of experience. "Not really. But I'm trying to make sure others don't have to suffer the way I suffered. I believe you can't expect others to change everything, but you can at least offer a helping hand. Sometimes that's all it takes for things to start changing." Clara looked down, biting her lower lip. She didn't know if she really believed this man. Their footsteps echoed on the cold cobblestones of the city, but there was something in the air that made him believe he was not like the others. She felt like a shipwreck, drifting away without knowing if the rescue was real or just an illusion. They arrived in front of an old building on the corner of a deserted street. The place seemed abandoned, its windows dark, its walls stained by time. Clara stopped, her eyes suspicious. "Is it here?" she asked, a hint of anxiety in her voice. The man nodded, then, with a gesture, he opened the door to a small, narrow passage.
The interior was warm, a stark contrast to the exterior.
The scent of hot soup hung in the air, and dim lights cast a soft, almost intimate light. "Come," he said in a calm voice, an invitation that sounded more like relief than obligation. Clara froze at the entrance, her heart racing.
For a moment she felt vulnerable, ready to lose everything again.
But as she took one last look behind her, at the dark street, at the echo of her footsteps, she realized that there was no going back. She had to move forward. Perhaps this refuge would be his last chance. She took a hesitant step inside, immediately feeling the warmth that enveloped her like a blanket. The sound of the door closing behind her made her shiver, but she knew that, for the first time in a long time, she was not alone. The man led her through a short hallway and opened a door. Inside, a group of people sat around a large wooden table, eating, laughing, sharing stories. An old man stood up as soon as he saw them, a kind smile on his face. "Welcome," he said.
We were waiting for you.
Clara stopped on the threshold, looking at these warm faces, these eyes full of compassion. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of security, as if a small miracle was happening, a glimmer of hope in the midst of the darkness. But at the same time, a weight remained on his shoulders. She knew this help was fragile, and she still had to fight. But at least for tonight she had found a place to breathe. A place where she was not invisible. She gently placed her son on a chair near the table, and with a trembling gesture, she sank into an armchair, her heart heavy, but strangely soothed.